Now, it's my great and amazing honor to welcome Vanessa Ochs into this space right now. She will start us off with a brief reflection on rituals of hope during seasons of loss. Dr. Ochs is an ordained rabbi and a renowned scholar of religion in the Jewish Studies program here at the University of Virginia, where she teaches on many subjects, among them New Jewish Ritual, Jewish Feminism, spiritual writing, material culture, and more. Rabbi Ochs won the National Jewish Book Award for her book, Inventing Jewish Rituals. She is beloved as a professor, as a rabbi, and a member of the Charlottesville community. Welcome, Vanessa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so honored by the opportunity to be part of Deeper Dialogues. I thank Mary Dryden as well, who prepared me so carefully for this evening. And I thank all the facilitators who worked very hard to train, and for all of you who've come tonight, including some friends of mine whom I see, my friends and colleagues, and people who know as much about this topic as I do. I'm always surprised when folks in the Jewish community who have not been all that connected to their Judaism, when I'm surprised when they face a death in their family, that they say, oh, I want to have a Jewish funeral. I want to mourn the way that Jews do. And it's like, well, why? You don't observe the Sabbath, and you don't observe the holidays, and there's so many Jewish practices that you don't do. What is it? What is it that now you want to know? Not even just what are some of the contours, but you want to know some very specific rules and regulations. And I think it's because at the time of a deep loss, and it could be the death of a close person, but it could be a death in your circle or some kind of a loss, is that we're looking for a path. We're looking for a way. We're looking for directions. In the same way that we're so glad sometimes when we're totally lost and our GPS says go right, go left, be in the third lane to the left, and then turn right. It's like, thank you. Just thank you so much. That there are times when, because of our sadness or our anger or our grief or being shell-shocked, we just want to know what to do. And if it's old and wise and holy and sacred, all the better. Some of you probably know that that Judaism has many rich traditions for funerals, for mourning at the time of a funeral, and well beyond, for years after. And I've noticed by simply reading the New York Times that many non-Jews have adapted particular Jewish practices. There's a Jewish practice for mourning, which I'll speak about in a moment, called Shiva or Shiva. And I've heard many non-Jewish folks saying, yeah, we're going to have an unshiva, or we're going to have a non-shiva, or we're going to have our own shiva. And that's, of course, a really beautiful thing and quite understandable. I would say that with all of the richness of the rituals for mourning in Jewish community, or in any community that you're part of, it can happen oh so easily that the rituals just don't fit. For one reason or another, maybe because your situation is unusual, maybe because it's a friend who's died and not a relative, or maybe it's your stepmother's sister's husband, and this person was really rich in your life, but you can't really justify that you're going to be missing work the next day, or maybe your dog or your cat died, and you know no one's going to send you flowers, but you're just totally bereft, and there seems to be no space where you can process and grieve and mourn and receive comfort. It may be that when you are in a situation of mourning, you're at school, and you're in a semester abroad, or you're somehow or another far away from family and far away from your close circle of friends, and or perhaps your home country and your home language, and what otherwise would have been so familiar and comforting is not there for you. Or perhaps you just don't quite fit in anymore with the community that you were raised in. And doing practices the way they used to do it, it just won't feel authentic to you. And it would feel almost hypocritical or just not right. And so you feel, well, now what do I do? And now who's here for me? So let me talk a little bit about Jewish practices of mourning and healing, because I think they might be inspirational. And I want to share as well when they don't work and when we improvise, if that might be a source of inspiration as well. So and I'll be speaking about traditional Jewish practices, those you might see in Orthodox, in conservative, in many Reform communities. So you'd see these all around. So very typically, when a Jew learns that someone has died, and you hear it perhaps from the loved one, you don't say to them often, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or "May you be comforted." You say this phrase, "Baruch Dayan Emet," "Blessed is God, the true judge." And it's a handy phrase to say. It's handy to have a phrase, because when you hear this news, if it's out of the blue or you're expecting it, you're lost for words. And having words to say, to fill in that moment, matter a great deal. I'm always surprised how I think that I shouldn't be communicating with the person who just had a sudden loss. And my new practice is, if someone had a loss, I text them right away. I'm thinking of you. What work needs to be done? Where can I bring the food? Do you need a coat rack? Do you need a coffee urn? What needs to be done? And oddly enough, I hear right back. Even people who have had tragic losses, I hear right back that it mattered that you filled in that gap and that you were there next to me. Jewish funerals take place pretty soon after the death. And so people gather very, very quickly. At the cemetery, it's often done that not just the rabbi will offer some words, but also members of the family, and sometimes really close friends will offer some words. The word in Hebrew is a hesped, a eulogy. And the beautiful practice of a hesped is that you can step up and offer one, but you can also say, "I'm a mourner right now." And in Judaism, the mourner is the official mourner, is the mother, father, brother, sister, son, daughter, or partner. I've probably forgotten one, but these are considered the key mourning positions. And I think it's really useful to know that there's no obligation for the mourner to speak. The mourner can feel quite cared for. At the cemetery, after the prayers are said, there is a practice of taking dirt and shoveling it on top of the coffin. It's done in a unique kind of way. The mourners will take the shovel with it upside down, showing their reluctance. And then when they put it down, they don't hand it to the next person who's going to do the shoveling. They put it down, and the next person will take it from the ground. This sense that we don't want to pass on death from one to another. And a great deal of any groups, ritual practices concerning dying and death have a great deal of what we would call superstition, magic. It's not superstition, it's not magic. I think in religious studies, we know that what other people do in their religions, we say it's superstition and magic. And what we do is ritual and religion. But there's no law about the shoveling, but it's a very deep practice. And probably the deepest part of the practice is the sound, that when you hear the pebbles falling on top of a wooden coffin, and Jewish coffins are traditionally plain wood. When you hear that sound, there's a sense of finality. I was talking about Jewish funerals with an Anglican priest friend of mine today, And she says there's a tendency in her community not to have funerals, but to have celebrations of life. And while there might be in a Jewish community a memorial for a person who's died, a funeral is not a celebration of their life. It's not in the least bit a happy event. It's profoundly sad. It's a time for grieving. It's a time for feeling loss. It's a time for being held up by others. It's a tradition that doesn't obliterate the darkness of the moment. There's a ritual that's quite beautiful right after the ceremony takes place at the gravesite, and that's that the mourners' companions, the friends, the people who've come to the funeral, they make 2 rows, and the mourner walks between them. And you look to the right and you look to the left, and you see your relatives, you see your friends, you see your neighbors, you see people from the community that you're just surprised even came. You just can't believe it. And they speak a phrase of mourning. And there's something so powerful about that visual of however, wherever you look, you're being held up by love. The mourners then go home to their house, or sometimes if it's a large group, they'll be going to a synagogue, perhaps a social hall. And the mourners are given food. The mourners are fed. After my mother passed away recently, I walked into my house, where it's the place where I feed everybody, where I'm serving everybody and I'm taking care of everybody. And my older son-in-law handed me an egg, a hard-boiled egg, a sign of life, a sign of all that endures. And he said, "Sit down and eat this." And there's an acknowledgement that mourners should not need to take care of themselves. And for the week of Shiva, a 7-day or so, some people do it less, and the days can be shortened if there's a Sabbath or a holiday. There are all kinds of reasons where it might be shortened. But your friends and your family, they take care of you. And it's a beautiful feeling to be cared for, a very powerful feeling. During Zoom, of course, people could not come to your house. And that was truly, truly hard for those of us who had Zoom funerals and Zoom Shivas for our families. Some of us could not even be at our loved one's funeral. A terrible, terrible loss of being able to mark. But there's this Zoom thing, Shiva, emerged, where people would come and gather perhaps once during the day, or for a prayer service, possibly in an observant community, or simply to gather and to share stories about the loved one, one's loved one. And what was quite beautiful about the Zoom Shiva, I found, is if I was a Shiva visitor, was there would be people from around the world in different time zones who never could have made it to the funeral in time. And there they were telling the stories of the loved ones. I must confess, and for anyone who experienced Zoom mourning, I miss the touch. I miss the hug. I miss the casseroles. There was so much that I missed. Fortunately, some of my dear friends in Charlottesville brought over food. One of my dear friends who's on Zoom today brought me a plant, which is still precious to me, and I look at it and I think of it as a plant of love, and my mom's plant, and it means a great deal to me. By the way, Jews do not do flowers for funerals. Jews do not do plants. And I am so grateful that I have non-Jewish friends who sent me plants and who sent me flowers, because they brightened up my home. And it brought me the sweetness of their love. At the end of the 7-day period, and this is one of the most beautiful practices that Jews do. My friend Liz Alexander, I probably will agree that this is a beautiful one, is someone often in your family or a friend will take the mourner from their house where they've been all week. They have not gone to work. They didn't have to get dressed up for work. They didn't put on shoes. They were just home. They didn't do errands. and take them around the block for a walk around the block. And then when you go back into the house, you've been back into the world again. And no, you don't stop mourning then. You don't at all. You're officially a mourner for 30 more days, or if it's your parents, for 11 months. The mourning goes on, but there's an acknowledgement that there are different phases of mourning, and no one has to fit the calendar. 11 days. You certainly, we all have our own time frames for mourning, but this walk around the block takes us from our speechlessness and our sometimes paralysis, and moves us back into acknowledging that the world is still going on, and it's there to welcome us back bit by bit as we're ready. So I mentioned before that not all the Jewish rituals work all the time, and sometimes we improvise because of our situation or just because who we are, and sometimes the improvisations are just right. Zoom Shiva obviously is an improvisation. And I'll tell you about one ritual which inspired some improvisation. There's a practice called Shloshim, where for 30 days you study a particular text, or a text that's been designated in the memory and the honor of the person who's passed away, as one imagines, as their soul is beginning to rise up, if that's your theology. And Jews have so many different, every Jew another theology or lack thereof, very, very, very diverse in all kinds of beliefs. And at the end of those 30 days, you gather, you talk about what you studied, you have you say the mourner's prayer once again, and often you might have some schnapps, you might have a little whiskey with the people who've been mourning with you, even in the morning. But it happened that my sister and I were together on this 30th day, and we had been studying Talmud, we had been studying rabbinic literature each day, and we decided, since that day was also my mother's birthday, we would go off to a lake. And so there we were at the lake, and there weren't other people it was beautiful, but there weren't other people to join with us to create a Kaddish, to say the Kaddish, to say the mourner's prayer. So my sister and I went off on the lake in kayaks. And we were kayaking away, and we were saying to each other, well, we're supposed to say the mourner's Kaddish. And we looked up and we saw an osprey, and then 2 ospreys. And soon, flying above us in circles, were 8 ospreys. So there were 8 ospreys, and then there was me, and there was Susan. It's like, 10, enough to say the Kaddish, enough to say the prayer, say the morning prayer. Is there such a tradition in any Jewish text that includes ospreys in saying the mourner's prayer? I assure you, you can look really hard. I don't think it's there. But for me, for my sister, and for my mother's soul, that was the right practice for us that day. And I invite all of you, as you think in this beautiful setup of having reflection, facilitate reflection, I invite you to think of those rituals that have worked for you, and to remember times when you've improvised. And I can tell you for sure, I know one way that we have all improvised healing and mourning rituals, and it's any time that we make grandma's recipe for chicken soup, or Aunt Betty's recipe for butterscotch brownies, or that apple cake she used to make for the new year. Anytime we make a recipe of someone that we loved who isn't here anymore, it's where we're mourning them and we're celebrating them. And as we gobble up that cake or that soup, they are in us. They are sustaining us. So thank you so much for this time.